He ripped the necklace from my throat in front of everyone. The last thing my mother gave me, gone in seconds. No one stopped him, not even the ones who used to call me family. If you've ever been erased like that, leave a dot. And if you want more stories that speak the truth, subscribe to the channel. I didn't plan to speak. I wasn't even sure I should have shown up. But sometimes the places that once broke you are the same places that force you to rise. Let me take you back to that day. The day I walked into my cousin's wedding in a faded beige dress and walked out with something they never expected. My name, my silence, my power. I didn't belong there, and everyone made sure I knew it. The frost bit through the thin soles of my shoes as I stepped into the courtyard of the Ashbourne estate. My cousin Celeste was getting married, a grand ceremony complete with string quartets, ice sculptures, and chandeliers flown in from Venice. I stood still near the gift table, the only one in a plain beige dress that hung loose on me after years of stress and sacrifice. It wasn't designer. It wasn't even new. But it was all I had. My hands trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from the weight of what I knew was coming. They said nothing when I arrived, just the same glances, the same smirks hidden behind champagne flutes. I wasn't family anymore. Not since I married young, dropped out of college, worked as a cleaner to survive, and refused to conform to the Ashbourne legacy of polished perfection. Then it happened louder than I expected, crueler than I feared. "She's just the housemaid," my father barked from across the marble-floored courtyard. "Look at her wearing that necklace like it means something." His voice cracked through the celebration like lightning. Guests stopped mid-sentence. Celeste's groom froze with a canapé halfway to his mouth. I stood there, unable to breathe. My fingers reached instinctively for the silver chain around my neck. It was the last gift my mother gave me before she died, a small, knotted pendant meant to symbolize strength and connection. My father lunged forward and yanked it. The chain snapped. The sound of it tore through me. "No daughter of mine parades around pretending she belongs here," he sneered, holding the broken necklace up like it was filth. I didn't move. I didn't speak. My jaw locked, the fury deep inside me clawing to the surface. The Ashbournes watched in silence. Aunt Rosalind shifted uncomfortably. My teenage cousins whispered behind their manicured hands. No one came to my defense. Not even the ones who used to call me their favorite, when I was still good enough to decorate their perfect family tree. Then came the final humiliation. A security guard approached me awkwardly. He didn't meet my eyes. "Miss, I'm sorry, but you've been asked to wait outside." I nodded. I didn't want them to see the fire starting to burn behind my ribs. They called me a burden, a failure, said I was reckless, too soft, too strange. I stepped out of the warmth and into the cold. The sky had darkened. Frost clung to the gravel path like dust over a forgotten photo. I wrapped my arms around myself, not to keep warm, but to keep from shaking, from screaming. And then I heard it. A low growl, the purr of a V12 engine as a black Rolls-Royce glided up the estate's driveway. I froze. The driver jumped out and opened the back door, and there he was, Julian Crestfield, my husband. The man my family believed was imaginary, a fantasy I made up to save face. They never believed someone like me, discarded, unseen, could have a love like that. They never believed I was worth loving. He stepped out slowly, wearing a tailored charcoal coat, the collar raised against the wind. His eyes scanned the courtyard like a hawk. And when they landed on me, something in him shifted, tightened. He didn't say a word. He didn't ask questions. He stormed into the crowd like he owned the place, because in many ways, he did. Julian Crestfield wasn't just powerful. He was dangerous in the boardroom, unshakable in negotiations, and respected in every circle that mattered. And now, here he was, in the belly of the very family that discarded me. "Who touched my wife?" he said, voice low, steady, and terrifying. No one answered. My father's lips parted, but the words died in his throat. Julian didn't flinch. "Ava Delaney Crestfield is not just my wife," he said, turning to the guests so all could hear. "She built herself from nothing. She gave more than any of you ever did, and today you humiliated her. I stood at the edge of the glass doors, watching it unfold like a storm wrapped in silk. I was told to wait outside, I said softly, stepping inside. Julian turned and looked at me as if I was the only person there. You didn't ruin the wedding, he whispered. They did. Then he faced the crowd again. If one more word is spoken against her, every contract the Ashbournes have with my companies will evaporate by morning. Every deal, every favor, every connection. Silence, not the guilty kind, the terrified kind. And then he handed me a folded paper. This estate, he said, was sold to my firm last week. The new deed, Ava's name is on it. My breath caught. I stared at the document. My name, real and undeniable, scrawled in bold ink across the top. My father's mouth moved. You bought the house, he croaked. This estate has been in our family for... Julian cut him off. It still can be, if you respect my wife. If not, you vacate by March. I looked him straight in the eye. You said I was just the maid, but this house belongs to me now. And this time, no one dared to look away. We didn't speak on the drive home. The silence between Julian and me wasn't cold. It was something heavier, a silence filled with too many unsaid things. I stared out the tinted window, watching the frost blur against the glow of the Ashbourne estate, shrinking in the distance. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel, vindicated, triumphant. Instead, all I felt was hollow. Julian reached across the back seat and gently took my hand in his. His fingers were warm, protective, but I could feel he was holding back too. Not because he didn't care, but because he knew me well enough to let me breathe first. You okay? He asked softly. I nodded. Lead. Because the truth was, I wasn't okay, not even close. When we got back to the penthouse, I peeled off the dress, the one I thought might help me blend in. It lay on the floor like a broken disguise. I stood by the mirror and stared at my collarbone bare, now the silver necklace gone. What was left of it sat on my nightstand, the broken chain coiled like a wound. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the city lights flickering behind the windows. And I felt it. Not sadness, not rage. Something worse, emptiness. I didn't lose my family. I lost the illusion of it. For years, I held on to some quiet hope that maybe one day they'd see me, that if I worked hard enough, became good enough, successful enough, they'd welcome me back. But tonight, under their golden chandeliers and plastic smiles, I finally saw them for what they really were. They never wanted me. They wanted to forget me. But something cracked open tonight, and through that crack, something older stirred something I'd buried long ago. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk, took out the photo album I hadn't touched in years. I flipped through the pages slowly. My mother, me at 12, a birthday cake with a single candle. Then one page later, him, my brother, Ethan, his smile crooked, his eyes warm, his arms wrapped around me the day I graduated high school. They don't ask about him anymore. They pretend he never existed, because he walked away from the Ashbournes first, years before I did, and he disappeared. But I knew where he went. I just never had the courage to follow. Until now. The next morning, I stared at the laptop screen cursor, blinking like a pulse. Subject, Professor Lin, it's Ava. I've been thinking about what you once said about teaching. Is that offer still open? I hit send. Then I sat back, breathing slowly. I wasn't sure if I wanted to teach, or lead, or simply become someone they could never ignore again. Because that's what this was now. Not revenge, redemption. The next few days passed in silence. Julian gave me space, though I caught him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking. There was worry in his eyes, but also something else. Pride, maybe, or fear. I couldn't tell. On the third night, I sat alone in the living room, the broken necklace in my palm. The metal was cold, but it felt familiar, like pain I'd grown used to. She would have been proud of you. I looked up. Julian stood in the doorway, barefoot, hair tousled. No armor tonight. Who, I asked. He walked over and sat beside me. Your mother. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Do you want to go back there, he asked. To the estate. No, I paused. Not yet. What then? I want to find Ethan. Julian's eyes widened just slightly. I thought you didn't know where he went. I lied, I said, years ago, to protect him and myself. A beat of silence. Why now, he asked. I looked down at the chain because I think it's time the Ashbournes faced all the truths they've buried, not just mine, his too. He didn't speak for a moment. Then he nodded. Then let's find him. Julian didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. That's the thing about someone who truly sees you. They follow even when the path vanishes under your feet. But as I lay in bed that night staring up at the ceiling, my heart whispered something darker. What if Ethan didn't want to be found? What if he left? Not just them, but me? And what if the truth about why he disappeared was a truth even I wasn't ready for? It started with a box, a simple cardboard box marked "Donate" that I'd forgotten I shoved to the back of the closet 3 years ago. I was searching for an old journal, something Ethan had scribbled in once, something I was sure I hadn't imagined. Instead, I found that box, and inside it, something waited for me. A postcard. Edges yellowed, corners soft from time, no return address. Just 2 words. Find me. It wasn't signed, but I knew the handwriting. My chest tightened. My fingers trembled. That postcard had no business being in my apartment. Julian hadn't seen it yet. I wasn't sure I wanted him to. I sat down on the floor and stared at it for what felt like hours. Find me. Those 2 words punched through 3 years of silence like a wrecking ball. When Ethan left, it wasn't dramatic. No slammed doors, no letters. One day he was just gone. They said he'd run away, that he couldn't handle pressure, that he'd snapped. But I knew better. I saw the bruises no one talked about. I heard the fights when I was too young to understand the words, but old enough to feel the fear. I remember one night hiding under the stairs. My mother was crying. Ethan was shouting. Father slammed something against the wall. And then, silence. That was the night Ethan packed his things. He kissed my forehead while I pretended to sleep and whispered, "You're braver than me." Then he vanished. Now with that postcard in my hands, I knew he hadn't vanished completely. He'd left me a trail, a test, a choice. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with every piece of paper I could find, school records, bank statements, emails, anything that might tell me where he went. Julian joined me at 3 a.m. He didn't say anything at first, just sat across from me, watching me underline addresses and names with shaking hands. "You really think he wants to be found?" he asked eventually. I looked at him. My voice cracked. I think he needed someone to care enough to try. The next morning, I went to the last place Ethan and I ever felt safe, the old public library downtown. We used to hide there when the house got too loud. He'd read books about space. I read poetry I didn't understand. I wandered through the quiet stacks like a ghost revisiting her own grave. The same creaky floorboards, the same smell of paper and dust. And in the corner reading cubicle, someone had etched something in the wood, barely visible beneath the years of polish. E plus A or escape. My throat closed. I remembered that. We'd carved it when I was 12. He was 16. Escape. That was always the plan. I left the library with tears in my eyes, but something stronger burning beneath them purpose. He left clues. He wanted me to find them. Julian helped me comb through everything, old record street cams, even outdated social media posts. For 3 days, we built a timeline. Where Ethan might have gone, who he might have become. He'd changed his name, I was almost certain, but not everything could be erased. Then came the break. A digital trace. A payment made 5 months ago from a small hardware store in Pennsylvania. The name on the receipt, E. Reeves. My heart stopped. Reeves was our mother's maiden name. We dug deeper, and then late one night I found it. An image, grainy, from a security cam. A man stocking shelves, head down, hoodie on. But I knew those shoulders, that walk. It was him. I gasped. Julian rushed over, peering at the screen. That's him. I nodded slowly, hand over my mouth. But then something else happened. A message pinged on my phone. No number, just a single line of text. He's not who you think he is. I stared at it. My blood ran cold. Who sent that? Julian looked at me. Ava, what is it? I turned the screen to him. He read it once, then again, and finally said, "We're not the only ones looking for him." But who else was watching me? And why were they trying to warn me? The town was smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had just grown larger inside, heavier, with memory, wider, with truths I couldn't forget. Julian drove the last stretch in silence while I held the postcard in my hands, turning it over and over again like it might confess something new if I stared long enough. Find me. 2 words that had unraveled everything. The address on the receipt led us to a sleepy hardware store just off the highway in a town that hadn't changed since the late 90s. The kind of place where the gas station still had analog pumps and every diner booth came with a regular who knew everyone else's story, except Ethan's. We parked across the street. My breath caught as I stepped out. The building looked tired, wooden siding, peeling window display, dusty, a faint buzz of neon barely holding on in the front window. Julian stayed back, giving me space. I didn't ask him to come with me. I just needed to see for myself. Inside, it smelled like metal and paper. There was no music, only the hum of an old fan spinning above. A man stood behind the register, mid-30s, baseball cap, thick beard. Not Ethan. But as I scanned the shelves, my eyes wandered to the staircase in the back. A second floor, a window just above the awning, and behind the dusty pane, a silhouette moved, not watching, just present. I didn't go upstairs, not yet. Instead, I bought a bolt I didn't need and asked about a man named Reeves. The cashier looked up sharply but said nothing, just bagged the bolt and muttered, "Haven't seen him in days." I stepped back out into the morning fog, my chest aching with something I couldn't quite name. We stopped by a diner after, one of those old-time places with cracked vinyl seats and lukewarm coffee that somehow tasted like memory. Julian ordered black. I didn't order anything, I just sat there staring out the window, waiting for the past to knock. It didn't, but something else did. A memory. We were kids again, Ethan and I. On a beach just before sunset, running so fast our feet barely touched the sand. He told me, "One day, I'll go somewhere no one can hurt us." I laughed then. I believed him. Now I wasn't so sure. That night, we checked into a motel just off the highway, a place with flickering signs and towels that smelled like bleach. Julian showered while I sat on the edge of the bed, holding that same postcard like it was a map. My hands were trembling. Maybe it was the caffeine. Maybe it was something older. I walked into the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. Yellow light, cracked tiles, water-stained edges. My eyes were rimmed with something tired. Not weakness, just truth. The kind of truth that doesn't hide anymore. I let one tear fall. Just one. I didn't wipe it away. Pause moment. That night, I stood alone in that cracked bathroom. No plans, no noise, no expectations. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't chasing belonging. I was walking towards something else, something real. The next morning, we returned to the hardware store. It was closed. A small handwritten sign taped to the glass read, "Back in 2 days." No name. No timestamp. I stared at it for a long time. "What now?" Julian asked gently. Wait, I said. "He left a trail. He knows I'm following. He'll come." We spent the day walking the town. I spoke to a waitress in the diner who remembered a quiet guy who kept to himself. No last name. No trouble. Paid in cash. Always tipped well. But his eyes, she said they looked like he was running from something. That night, I wrote Ethan a letter. Not a long one, just the truth. "Ethan, I don't know if you're hiding or protecting me from something, but I need to know the truth. Not for the Ashbournes, not even for Julian, for us. You were my anchor in a house that tried to drown me. Please, don't let me search in silence." I left it with the cashier the next morning, sealed in an envelope with the words, "For E. Reeves." And then we waited. Night fell heavy that day, the kind of darkness that carries questions in its shadow. We parked in front of a farmhouse just outside of town, the last known delivery address we traced to him. Julian turned off the engine. We sat in silence watching the porch light flicker in the wind. No one came out. No one ever does in moments like this, not right away. Then just as I was about to tell Julian to drive, the porch light turned off, and a voice behind us, deep low and far too close, said, "You shouldn't have come here." I turned slowly. My breath caught in my throat before I even saw his face. The voice, I hadn't heard it in years, but something in it struck a nerve so deep it almost dropped me to my knees. He stood behind the car, partially hidden by shadow. Hood up, shoulders hunched, one hand in his jacket pocket, the other at his side, fingers twitching like he couldn't decide whether to reach out or run. "Ethan," I whispered. He didn't move. Julian stepped forward slightly, but I raised my hand. "Let me." I took a breath and walked toward him. The gravel crunched under my feet, each step louder than it should have been in the cold silence of the night. He looked different, tired, harder around the edges. But it was him. His eyes still held the same flicker of defiance, the same kind of pain that could never be unlearned. And beneath it all, I saw something else. Guilt. He exhaled slowly. "You weren't supposed to come. You left me a postcard." "No," he said quickly. "I left that years ago. I didn't know it ever found you." I blinked. It did. And now I'm here. He looked past me to the car. "That's your husband." I nodded. "Julian. He helped me find you." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You shouldn't have involved him. You shouldn't have involved anyone." I folded my arms. "Why? Because you're in danger, or because you're the danger now?" That got to him. He looked away. "People are watching me, Ethan. They sent a message to my phone. They warned me about you." "I know," he said, voice low. "You know, I'm not the only one who disappeared," he said. "Not from them, from what they built, from what they covered up." He glanced back at the farmhouse. "Come inside, but only you." Julian looked at me. I nodded once. He didn't argue. He trusted me. The inside of the farmhouse smelled like pine wood and dust. It was barely furnished: a couch, a table, 2 mugs on the counter. Ethan poured water from a steel kettle, hands shaking just enough for me to notice. When he handed me a mug, I saw it, a scar long and white across his right hand. It hadn't been there before. I didn't ask yet. We sat in silence for a few minutes. The old kettle ticked behind us as it cooled. "I left," he said eventually, "because if I stayed, I would have become like him." My heart stilled. "Dad?" I asked. He nodded. And not just him. The whole damn machine behind him. The donations, the name, the lies. I found out what they did to Mom. My spine straightened. "What are you talking about?" Ethan looked at me, and in his eyes was a truth so heavy I nearly looked away. "She didn't fall down the stairs, Ava. She didn't die in an accident. She found out what Father was laundering through the family trust. She confronted him, and then she was gone." I stared at him. The room spun. "You're saying I'm saying he had help. And I'm saying if we try to go to the police, they'll bury us like they buried her." My fingers tightened around the mug. Pause moment. I always believed pain had a shape, a weight, but I never realized the heaviest kind of pain is the one that comes with clarity. The moment when the lie finally dies and what replaces it is unbearable truth. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, barely above a whisper. "Because you were still in that house. And because I didn't want you to carry it. I thought if I ran far enough, I could end it without you ever needing to know." "You were wrong," I said. "I know," he said. "That's why I sent the postcard. I was too late. But I wanted to give you something, some direction, a thread to pull." I opened my bag and pulled out the envelope I'd written the night before. "This was for you." He took it, read the first line, and folded it gently. Then he reached behind a loose panel on the kitchen wall and pulled out a thick folder stuffed with documents, photos, and copies of financial ledgers. "This," he said, "is everything they didn't want us to see." He handed it to me. My hands trembled. Now what I asked, "We burn it down," Ethan said, eyes burning, but quietly, not with fire, with exposure. As I tucked the folder into my coat, Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced down. His face went pale. What I asked, he didn't answer at first, just held up the screen. A single text from a blocked number. "She knows everything now. We didn't leave the farmhouse that night." Ethan triple locked the door and pulled the curtains shut. I spread the documents across the small kitchen table, my hands moving on instinct, sorting, circling, connecting dots. Receipts, emails, wire transfers with names I didn't recognize but dates I did. Deaths, resignations, silent donations funneled into obscure trusts. Julian stayed in the living room, keeping watch. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. He knew this was the moment I stepped out of grief and into resolve. The Ava who used to shrink beneath their words was gone. This Ava planned. Ethan and I worked for hours. By morning, the table looked like a crime board red marker, lines, faces, companies, aliases. Everything pointed to one central node, the Ashbourne Foundation. Their pride, their legacy, their cleanest lie. I stared at its name circled in red. "I want to bring it down," I whispered. Ethan nodded. "You're not the only one." "What do you mean?" "There's someone else," he said. "A woman who used to work as their internal counsel. She left just before Mom died. Her name's Weller. I tried to contact her once years ago. She never responded." "Then we try again," I said. I sent the message from an encrypted address attaching only 4 words and a scanned page. "You warned her, I know." Less than an hour later, I got a reply. "Meet me. Alone. No signature. Just a location, a cafe downtown behind an antique bookstore." Julian drove me there but stayed parked across the street. I entered through the back alley, heart pounding against my ribs like it knew what was coming. The woman sitting by the window had silver hair pulled into a braid and eyes that didn't flinch. Her coat was charcoal wool, neat, old-fashioned. She didn't look like a whistleblower. She looked like someone who'd already survived the fire and walked back into it anyway. "You're Ava," she said. Not a question. "You're Miss Weller." She slid a manila envelope across the table. "I've been waiting for this moment since your mother died." I held her gaze. "Why didn't you speak sooner?" "Because I had no proof," she said, "and because I was scared." She took a slow sip of tea, then leaned in. "They made her sign a document," Weller whispered. "A statement. It was supposed to cover their tracks. I told her not to. I begged her. She said she had no choice, that they threatened you and Ethan." My stomach twisted. "She never told me." "She tried to protect you," Weller said. "She always did." Pause moment. All this time, I thought I left her behind, that I ran from her memory, her warmth, her silence. But she hadn't abandoned me. She sacrificed herself for me. She gave her voice to silence so mine could one day rise. "What's in the file?" I asked. "Proof. At least enough to force an audit. Emails, memos, copies of payments from offshore accounts linked directly to your father's name and several others." "Why did you keep this?" "Because I knew one day someone brave enough would come looking." I exhaled shakily. "I'm not brave." "You came anyway." That night, back at the motel, Ethan and I reviewed every page she gave us. Piece by piece, the image sharpened. My father wasn't alone. The Ashbourne board, my uncles, their investors, even Celeste's groom's father, they were all in it. And then came the name I didn't expect. Margot Ellis, an investigative journalist, once blacklisted, discredited. But according to Weller's notes, she'd been chasing this exact trail before she disappeared from the press. I searched her name online. Nothing recent. But after 5 minutes of digging, I found a personal blog last updated 3 years ago still online. And one post. Just one. "If you're reading this, they buried the story. But someone else will find the roots." My hands shook as I clicked into the source code. There was a hidden email address. I sent a message, attached the documents, used a name only someone inside would recognize Weller. I didn't expect an answer. But 3 hours later, my phone lit up. "Message from unknown number. I'm in, but be careful. They're watching all of you now." I showed it to Ethan. He didn't look surprised. "They won't stop," he said, "even if it means—" "Then neither will we," I interrupted. "We weren't just building a case. We were building a reckoning." But late that night, another message arrived. Not from the journalist. Not from Weller. No contact name. Just a short, chilling sentence. "You think she died for you? Ask Ethan why she really stayed." I didn't say anything right away. The message sat on my phone screen, glowing in the dim motel room. "You think she died for you? Ask Ethan why she really stayed." I stared at it numb. Julian had fallen asleep in the other bed. Ethan was outside talking to someone on a burner phone we'd bought 2 days ago. I could hear the muffled sound of his voice through the wall, calm, steady. But in my chest, something unraveled. I waited until he came back in. He closed the door quietly, placed the phone down, and looked at me. I didn't wait. "Who sent you outside tonight?" His eyes flicked to the phone, then back to me. No one. Just an old contact. Don't lie to me. He froze. I held up the message. Whoever this is, they know something you haven't told me. He stayed still for too long. That silence, it wasn't guilt. It was calculation. I stood up slowly, crossing the room. Ethan, what did Mom stay for? He looked down at his hands. Ava, please. This isn't. Answer me. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor like it would swallow him. She didn't stay for us. My throat tightened. Then who? She stayed for him. A pause, the kind that cuts deeper than shouting ever could. I blinked. You're saying she loved him after everything. No, he said quickly. Not love. Loyalty. It was twisted. She knew what he was. She knew what he did. But she also believed she could change it from the inside. She thought, if she kept quiet long enough, she could protect the name, the family. You. I shook my head. No, I whispered. That doesn't make sense. She hated what he was doing. She did, Ethan said, voice raw, but she also helped him at first. She signed off on things, approved transfers, gave him access. My legs nearly gave out. You knew this all this time. I found the documents a year after she died, he said. It's all in the ledger, her initials, her handwriting. She was involved before she tried to blow the whistle. I staggered back. You told me she died a hero. She did, Ethan said, but first she played a part. I couldn't speak. I felt the air shift in the room. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear through every paper we'd gathered, rip apart the pieces of her I had rebuilt in my head. The warm hands, the lullabies, the soft strength. How much of it was real? She stayed because she thought she could control it, Ethan said. And when she realized she couldn't, she tried to walk away. That's when they silenced her. And you kept this from me, I said finally. He looked up, eyes bloodshot. Because I knew what it would do to you. Because I didn't want you to stop believing in her. She was all we had left. Pause moment. There's a kind of heartbreak that doesn't explode, it dissolves. Quietly. Like acid in your chest. It starts with a name you trusted and ends with the weight of truth you never asked for. I walked out. Rain had started to fall, soft, icy needles tapping against my skin as I stood outside the motel. I didn't bring a coat. I didn't care. I let it soak me. I needed something to sting harder than betrayal. Julian found me 20 minutes later. He didn't say anything, just stood beside me, umbrella in one hand, waiting. Eventually I spoke. She helped him. He didn't ask who. He knew. I turned to him. If you ever hide something like that from me, I'll walk and never look back. His jaw tightened. I won't. I nodded once, then went back inside silent. The next day, Ethan was quiet. He didn't fight when I asked for the documents. He didn't ask when I packed a small bag. I didn't say where I was going. He didn't ask. That afternoon, I sat alone in the corner of a library, the documents spread across a table. My fingers brushed over her handwriting, looping, familiar, deadly. It was hers. Every initial, every signature. I didn't cry. I couldn't. But I felt something shift again. If she was capable of covering for them, even once, then what else had we never seen? That night, Julian showed me something he hadn't before. A recording. Low quality. Glitched audio. Pulled from a court archive he'd found weeks ago and kept hidden until now. In it, a woman's voice testifies against the Ashbourne Foundation in a closed case. The voice was unmistakable. It was my mother. And in her final line, quiet trembling, she says, "If anything happens to me, look to Ethan." I dropped the recorder. The library smelled like dust and paper grief. I didn't remember walking there. I just found myself sitting at the farthest corner table, the tape recorder beside me, the final words of her voice still echoing in my skull. "If anything happens to me, look to Ethan." I played it again and again. Each time her voice sounded more distant, or maybe it was me growing numb. I stared at the folder full of her signatures, her initials on transfer forms, silent approvals. For days I'd tried to hold on to the version of her I believed in, but now even that felt like a story I'd invented to survive. Julian hadn't followed me here. I told him not to. I needed silence. I needed distance. because nothing made sense anymore. If Mom warned about Ethan, then who had I really been trusting? He was my lighthouse once, the only voice that didn't try to shape me, control me, twist me into something digestible. But now I wondered if I had only ever seen the version of him he wanted me to see. I remembered being little, 8 maybe, watching him argue with Mom in the kitchen, not yelling, but firm like he knew better than her. She was crying. I'd blocked that memory for years. It came back now like thunder after a long silence. I left the library just before noon and walked for hours, through the edge of the woods, past the quiet streets. I didn't check my phone. I didn't want to know who was looking for me. Not yet. That night, I checked into a different motel, under my mother's maiden name. I didn't tell Ethan. I didn't tell Julian. I stared at myself in the cracked mirror above the sink. The light flickered. My eyes looked like someone else's. Pause moment. There's a version of me I used to chase, the strong one, the graceful one, the woman who could walk into any room and make silence speak louder than applause. But tonight, I didn't want to be her. I wanted to be no one. I wanted to rest inside the emptiness until it stopped hurting. The next morning, I took the file, the entire set of documents Ethan and I gathered, and I placed it on the desk of a lawyer Weller recommended, a woman named Dana Crest. Cold eyes, brilliant mind. She didn't ask questions. She just opened the folder and read. For 20 minutes, I sat across from her as she flipped pages. When she finished, she looked up. This is enough to open an independent inquiry. I want it anonymous, I said. No names yet, just pressure. She nodded. You'll have it. Outside her office, the city felt colder, louder. I sat on a bench outside the courthouse and watched people move couples' briefcases, fast, coffee-polished shoes. They had no idea what storm was coming. And still I felt no pride, no power, just ache. That night, Julian called. I answered. Where are you? He asked. I'm safe. You're alone. Yes. A pause. You don't trust me either now, do you? I swallowed. I don't know who to trust. I don't even know if I trust myself. There was a longer silence. Then quietly, when you're ready, I'll still be here. I didn't reply, but something in me softened, not enough to return, but enough to breathe. Days passed. Ethan texted, then called. I didn't answer. He left me a voicemail. I didn't want you to hear that tape, but I didn't destroy it either. Maybe that means something. I didn't delete the message, but I didn't reply. That weekend, I stood at the train station. Not to leave, just to watch. A train pulled away slow and powerful. I stayed behind. For the first time, I wasn't the one running. That night, I pulled out the torn photo I kept since I was 17, the one of Ethan and me on the front steps, arms around each other, a memory from before the fall. I folded it in half, slid it into the back of the file I'd handed the lawyer. Let the system see our smiles before it ripped us apart. Then I sent one last email to a journalist named Margot Ellis. Subject line, I have what you were silenced for. Within an hour, I got a reply. Then I hope you're ready to be hated for telling the truth. I stared at the screen, then typed back. I already am. But what I didn't know was that while I was reclaiming silence, someone else had already started speaking. I didn't knock when I walked into the building. The glass doors whispered shut behind me, sealing out the wind and every version of myself that had ever hesitated. My boots echoed across the marble floor of the Ashbourne Trust headquarters. No one recognized me. They would not like this. Sharp black coat, clean lines, flash drive in my palm like a blade. I didn't come to be seen. I came to end it. They taught me that silence meant weakness, but I'd learned that silence can also be power if you choose when to break it. Upstairs, the boardroom was empty except for one man, Marcus Langley, my uncle, by blood, by title, by rot. He didn't stand when I entered, but I saw the flicker in his eyes. Recognition, disbelief, then fear. I placed the flash drive on the table and slid it toward him. No threats, I said, no lawyers, no noise, just facts. He didn't touch it. You think you can... I already did, I interrupted. Pause moment. There's a point when fury turns to focus, when pain becomes precision. I wasn't here for revenge anymore. I was here to make sure they never did it again, not to me, not to anyone. I left without another word. Outside, Margot Ellis was waiting. She wore a gray coat with a pin that read, "Press." Her eyes met mine as if we were two survivors from different wars finally standing on the same battlefield. "You're sure?" she asked. I nodded. We entered the publishing office together, the documents Weller and I had compiled, the footage, the audits, the ledger, my mother's voice, Ethan's silence, everything. Margot reviewed every page with surgical calm. The only time she blinked was when she heard the tape. "She warned you," she said. "She warned us both." That evening, the first wave hit. An anonymous report leaked to 3 independent media outlets. The Ashbourne Foundation was under federal audit. News tickers scrolled quietly. Names floated across headlines like dying gods. Julian called. "I saw it." "I know," I replied. "You did it." "We did," I said, "but I'm not finished." I returned to the estate, not for drama, not for confrontation, just to look at it one last time. The windows were shuttered, the gardens overgrown. What used to feel like a cathedral of power now looked like what it truly was, a crumbling shrine to men who thought themselves untouchable. I stood there for a long time, not remembering observing. There was nothing left I wanted from that house. Not apology, not forgiveness, not closure. I had become the thing they feared most, a woman who no longer needed their approval. Later that night, I sat on the courthouse steps waiting. Ethan arrived eventually. He sat beside me without speaking. We looked out at the city. No more apologies. No more lies. Just air between us, heavy but breathable. "You leaked it," he said. I did. A beat. "Thank you." I didn't answer. I just nodded once. He took out a photo, the one of us from years ago. The original, not the folded copy. He placed it between us. "We were still kids," he said. "We had to grow up fast." Another beat. "I wish I had told you everything sooner." "I know." He looked down. "What now?" "Now," I said. Standing up, they learn what it feels like to be powerless. The next morning, every major paper carried a headline. Some were careful, most weren't. "Ashbourne Legacy Under Fire Daughter Exposes Generational Fraud Silent No More. Ava Delaney's Documents Shake Foundations." They used my name. Not as a victim, not as a shadow, as a force. My inbox overflowed. Requests for interviews, speaking engagements, partnerships, apologies. I didn't answer any of them, because I didn't need to. That night, Margot sent one final text. "They want your voice on record." I replied. "They had it for years. They ignored it. Let the evidence speak now." But then just before I turned off my phone, another message appeared. No name, just a location, just a time. Back where it started. "Tomorrow, midnight. Come alone." And under that one line, she left something only you could find. I almost didn't go. The message listed only a time and a place, midnight. The old greenhouse behind the Ashbourne estate, once filled with orchids no one truly cared for. I remembered it from childhood. We were forbidden from going near it after dark. But that night I went alone. No guards, no fear, just me and the sound of wind weaving through broken glass. The door groaned as I pushed it open. Moonlight filtered in through shattered panes. Dust swirled in silver shafts, and the smell of damp soil clung to the air. Everything inside had grown wild vines, curling through stone roots, pushing up through fractured tiles. And in the center, buried in the cracked soil of a rusted planter, something waited. I knelt, brushing the earth gently away. A silver locket. Old, simple, still faintly warm in my palm, though I couldn't explain why. I opened it. Inside was a photo, Ethan and me grinning on the front steps, maybe 10 and 6. Behind it, folded tightly, was a note. In my mother's handwriting. "My Ava, if you're reading this, the storm has either passed or you've grown strong enough to walk through it. I know I wasn't perfect. I know I stayed silent when I should have screamed, but I never stopped believing in you, not for 1 second. They took my voice, Ava, but I left my heart for you. I don't need you to avenge me. I need you to live with a peace they could never touch. Remember, this justice doesn't have to shout. It only has to stand tall." Mom. I didn't cry. I folded the note carefully, tucked it back into the locket, and held it tight in my hand. I walked out of that greenhouse carrying a piece of my mother that they never managed to erase. 2 weeks later, the investigation became public. The Ashbourne Foundation suspended all operations. Several board members resigned. Audits were launched, properties were seized, honors were revoked, the legacy rewritten. I never attended the hearings. I didn't need to. I had already spoken, and the silence that followed said more than I ever could. Instead, I went back to a classroom. Small, warm, full of young women sitting in the seats I used to dream about. I taught them about justice. Not as vengeance, but as structure. One student raised her hand. "Do you hate them?" I smiled. "Hate is a small fire," I said. "It only burns the one who holds it." One cold afternoon, I returned to where my mother used to sit beneath the large tree at the end of the garden, where she'd sip tea and write in her notebooks. Someone I don't know who had nailed a brass plaque to the trunk. "Alina Delaney, silence isn't weakness. It is the foundation beneath voices waiting for their moment." I pressed my hand to the plaque. Not to say goodbye, just to whisper you were right. I didn't attend the estate auction either. I didn't need to reclaim a throne they once forced me to crawl beneath. Instead, I sent a box. Inside a blank leather-bound journal and a single line written on the first page. "Rewrite this history, but this time with the hands of those who survived it." No name, no return address, just a chapter passed forward. The locket still rests on my desk. I don't wear it. I don't need to. But sometimes, in the morning light, it catches the sun just right. And I remember what my mother once carried in her silence and what I now carry in my voice. Not to shout, but to pass on,